Once a family member goes non-binary, is there really any hope? We're going to break this down, plus all your other woke horror stories, personal life scenarios where you want my advice and questions you guys have for me in this Voicemail Friday episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for sending in your voicemails. I still have so many more to go through. The link to send one in, if you're interested in being in a future episode, is, as always, in the description. And without further ado, I want to get right into our first voicemail, which is from somebody who has a family member who, it's really kind of a tough story, a sad story, but seems to have been caught up in an ideology and a movement that has taken them to a dark place. Let's listen.
Hi, Brad. My name is Alex. I'm a big fan of your show, and I just wanted to ask how you deal with losing someone to the insane ideologies you've been discussing. My younger brother started by identifying as non-binary, but then started piling up all of the labels. So now he's a transgender woman, polyamorous, a lesbian, and he's diagnosed himself with ADHD, bipolar disorder, anxiety, depression, and agoraphobia. So he hasn't worked in years, and he spends his days watching anime or playing video games. We're both in our late 30s, so this probably isn't a phase. And then he cut me off 2 years ago out of nowhere. Later I found out it's because I shared a social media post in which I said nobody should transition unless they have diagnosed severe gender dysphoria. So it's been hard enough losing him because we were completely inseparable as children. But then an anonymous person recently shared his Discord server with me, and he's been writing just the most horrendous fantasies about women. I won't go into much detail, but it's just about as shocking as you can imagine. And he also regularly shows off his male body on screen, if you catch my drift. So it feels a bit like the brother I knew has gone forever, like he's had a complete personality transplant. And I was wondering if you've ever lost any friends over political disagreements, and if so, how do you manage this weird sense of grief you get when you lose someone, but they're still alive? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the voicemail and for sharing, because it can't be easy. I mean, we're talking about somebody who I'm moved by, honestly, your message, because it sounds like you really loved your brother and you guys were so inseparable when you were younger. And I don't really have any comparable personal experience at all, really. So I'll just try to give you my initial thoughts on this and where I come from on it, which is never give up hope. Never say never. I mean, I often think back, there's a man named Daryl Davis who went around, he's a black man, and he met with members of the KKK, literal Klansmen, modern day members of the KKK, and he convinced them, through befriending them, through getting to know them, to give up their ways, and he collects their hoods when they quit the Klan. And I'll often remind myself that when I think that maybe somebody is like too far gone, or maybe, there's no hope. If people can be talked out of literally being in the KKK, grown adults, then never say never on being able to reach somebody or change their mind. Now, you do have to maintain boundaries with yourself. If somebody is toxic, if they're harmful, but it sounds like this person removed themselves from your life a while ago, so there's not really much you can do. By the way, I love how, you should only transition if you have gender dysphoria. It's like, how is that a hot take? How is that offensive or controversial? Like, something very strange is going on if that's like a weird take. Of course, it's the only reason you should transition, or that it should be taken seriously at all, is if you have very persistent gender dysphoria and there's no other way to accommodate it. Beyond that, why would anybody do that to themselves? Or why would we make these drastic accommodations in situations where it's not even medically necessary? That makes no sense. And you're not the crazy one there. All I would say is that your brother is an adult. There's nothing you can really do to control what path he goes down in life or what irresponsible things that he does. I don't need to imagine his body being displayed on the internet. The Discord fantasies sound really disturbing. But I would honestly, I would encourage you to maybe every so often extend an olive branch and reach out to your sibling and let them know that, hey, I'd still like to talk to you. I'd still like to connect. I still care about you. And you'd be surprised. That's one thing they tell people who are in who have loved ones who are in cults, is to, no matter how far gone they seem, try to keep a little thread of contact, because if that person starts to wake up, and there's no one, there's nothing, there's not even a door a little bit cracked open a little bit, then it's very hard for them to walk away and to leave that. But if you can maintain some tiny thread of contact or connection and just be there, and if your brother starts to wake up from some of this and take some responsibility and grow out of some of these delusions or ask questions, then you can be there to welcome him back into the fold. And then at some point you do have to let things go, even though you were wronged or you were harmed, if you want to be the bigger person. But at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do, right? Your sibling's an adult. They're responsible for their own life and their own choices. And in the meantime, you do have to mourn that loss, but I guess know that you did all you can and continue to do all that you can if you extend an occasional olive branch or try to connect in some small way or whatever. And then at the end of the day, I think it's a good rule of thumb in life to not obsess over and it's much easier said than done, trust me, I know, but to not beat ourselves up over or obsess over things that are ultimately out of our control, and instead to focus our emotional and mental and physical energy on the things that we actually can affect directly, not things that are kind of ultimately not up to us. It's up to your brother. And I wish you and your family all the best. And thank you so much for sending in your voicemail. I imagine a lot of people have had similar experiences. You guys let me know what you think about this situation in the comments. Do make sure to subscribe, like, yada, yada, yada. Now, up next, somebody has an interesting story about how they were actually a transgender DEI hire, a diversity hire, that is. Let's listen.
Hi, Brad. My name's Crystal. I'm what I like to say, one of the normal trans. And about 5 years ago, I was into the DEI nonsense as well. And I had an experience that really woke me up from the woke aspect of that, so to speak. I thought I was landing a dream job with a really great company, and I noticed that they bought into the DEI stuff. My phone interview was not going too well, and before it ended, I casually just brought up that I was trans, and all of a sudden, the recruiter slash hiring manager started actually liking me, brought me on to another interview, and before you know it, I got hired on, and yeah, I was a DEI hire, if I have to be honest. And that did not turn out too well because less than 2 months, I was kind of pressured to quit. And ever since then, it's really opened my eyes that DEI hires are bad for everyone. They're bad for me, bad for the business. And when people are DEI hires and it works well for them, unfortunately, that's where you see a lot of support. But some people just have to awaken themselves to the woke nonsense.
Well, thank you so much for this voicemail. It's a really interesting story and perspective. And I appreciate you being a listener and telling us about this because I've said this for a long time. I have many issues with DEI as opposed to equality, which is what I believe in. Equality of opportunity, meritocracy, non-discrimination. Those are the values I stand for. But DEI has turned into something different. In fact, that's why the E in DEI stands for equity, not equality. Is because equity actively involves discrimination often or differential treatment intended to right historical wrongs or bring about social justice or whatever kind of thing you have in mind. But when you put people in positions for which they would not qualify just in a pure meritocratic process in the name of diversity, not only the traditional argument is, oh, this is unfair to the people who are being discriminated against. And I would say that is the primary concern, right? So like, for example, with affirmative action, it was Asian American students in particular viciously discriminated against because of their race and kept down artificially from how many of them deserve to get into elite colleges because we don't want too many Asians. I think that's like really messed up. And that's one of the reasons I was very happy to see the Supreme Court rule against affirmative action. And I continue to advocate against that kind of thing. But then there's also the argument that it's not, in fact, the best thing for minority students to be uplifted, like Black students, for example, and put into colleges they wouldn't get into in a pure meritocratic process, you're setting those people up for failure in some cases and contributing to like the achievement gap between black and white students. Whereas if they actually went to the place that they should be just based on a pure merit, then they may thrive, they may succeed, but that merit exists for a reason. And things like GPA and SAT are reasonable predictors of college performance. So when you do that, you actually set these people up for failure. The other thing is that sometimes, even when you have qualified people who would have been a suitable choice for a position, but they are a member of a group and you do have an affirmative action system in place, then it almost gives them the slander of a diversity hire. I'll give you a good example of this. Biden openly said, and I thought this was a really gross thing to do, that for my Supreme Court justice, I'm only going to pick a black woman. So he just wiped out most of the options because of their race or gender, because a lot of them are white men or white women or just not black. So, I mean, you really narrow the pool down there. Then he picked Ketanji Brown Jackson. Now, what's interesting about that is Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was confirmed and is now a Supreme Court justice, she actually had the resume. Like, she had a top tier resume and qualifications. Whether you think she's a good justice now or not is a separate question. But he could have just picked her and just out of everyone, not because of her race, and just said, I've reviewed all the candidates and I'm going with Ketanji Brown Jackson. But instead, because he engaged in that DEI process and openly said it, like he was very explicit about it, she's now viewed as a diversity hire, and understandably so. And it's almost unfair to her because she was qualified. She wasn't unqualified on paper, whatever you think of her as a justice. And that's part of what I think you're describing here, how this is even unfair to the beneficiaries of DEI in many cases. So I say, scrap the whole thing, start over, and stop doing this, because I just think it's really harmful and counterproductive. But the truth is they're not going to. They're not going to stop doing it. I don't think so. A lot of them are very deeply ideologically wedded to this stuff. That's my take. That's my suspicion, at least. Up next, we have somebody who wants dating advice in DC, which I have personal experience in that we will talk about. Let's listen.
Oh, Brad, what's up, man? I'm based in DC. I'm a bi guy who's not really political, but definitely has more like conservative leanings or whatever. But yeah, I'm based in DC. Recently got back from overseas, and I'm just trying to reintegrate in the community, meet some cool people. But recently, man, I was seeing this girl, and she broke up with me because I didn't like divulge my politics, or I wasn't like giving blue hair energy, marching in the streets. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know, it was kind of dejecting, but I don't know, part of me thinks it's like to be expected in DC. And it's just tough to make friends here in DC when everyone's like super politically charged. So I don't know if you had any advice on just kind of charting your own course and doing your own thing, especially in a place like DC where it's just like tons of, we need to march energy, if you catch my drift. But yeah, man, I don't know. Any advice is welcome. And love what you guys are doing for the show. And yeah, dude, keep being awesome. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you and you tuning in and sharing your message. This one is, in fact, relatable to me. Some of the questions you guys ask, I have to kind of step outside my personal experience, but not this one, because I did live in DC and I dated as a gay man, which I imagine is different, but also a little more difficult than as a bi man, because women, you probably have more options with women who are conservative or whatever than you do with gay men. And it's like, yeah, it's a very political community. So a lot of the people you will meet will have very strong political feelings and very strong aversions and distaste for people who don't always share those feelings. So my first advice would be to move and get somewhere normal where people aren't obsessed with politics, and then you'll encounter more open-minded folks. Now, I understand that for a lot of people, that's not possible. Like, you're living in DC for a job or a career or something, and it's not going to change. Maybe explore a little bit deeper into Virginia is an option, right? If you meet somebody out in the sticks a little bit more, they might be a little more normal. But the other thing I would say is to just lead with it, just be more upfront with it. Like, I don't know exactly where you are on the political spectrum, but if you're a moderate Republican, put that in your bio, honestly, in DC, because then they'll self-sort. Then trash will take itself out, if you will, right? Like the people who are close-minded, who are going to hate you because of it, or are going to cut things off when they find out, they just won't swipe on you in the first place. Now, the downside of that is some people might swipe left on you who would have perhaps given you a chance if they'd gotten to know you first. But at least for now, that's a good way to skip all the drama and narrow it down. And even just with friends, yeah, it's I don't want to say like just be friends with Republicans, but that was my experience in DC, and things have probably changed significantly, was that like the Republican side would happily be friends with you in terms of the operatives and the journalists and everything, even if you were more liberal or you were more moderate than them or you weren't as far right as them or what have you, but not vice versa. So I ended up making mostly conservative friends during my time in DC, most of whom are significantly more to my right politically. And I would encourage you to maybe hang out in some of those crowds or meet some of those people because they might be more receptive. But yeah, I would say lead with it. Like, just own who you are, be upfront with it is my number one piece of advice, and then cast a wider net, perhaps. But it's not going to be easy. I can tell you that. It is not the city of love for people who don't share a certain specific kind of politics. That is for sure. All right, now we are going to listen to a voicemail from somebody who's involved in a spicy custody battle. First, though, do make sure to subscribe, like, comment, yada, yada, yada. The link to send in your own voicemail is in the description. Now let's listen to this interesting story.
Hey, Brad. This isn't purely political, but politics have poisoned it. I share international joint custody of my tween daughter between the United States and Canada. I live in Florida, my ex-wife in Ontario. She has primary custody, but the court order grants me generous access, typically 2 trips a year for holidays and the summer, which I feel is way too short, especially since I fit the bill for everything, for travel and all that, and that time is just not enough. Regardless, that was until this summer. Suddenly, my ex refused to let her come down with me, ranting about how Trump is in office, Canadians are getting arrested and deported en masse, airlines are falling out of the sky because of Trump, and how I back a guy tied to Epstein's crimes. She suggests we revisit in 3.5 years post-Trump. She's a reclusive introvert who barely leaves home, per our own daughter's admissions. Lately, she's embraced pride flags everywhere, fourth wave feminism, hardcore. And then, I guess last week, she let her daughter stay home from school for the entire week, claiming our daughter was overstimulated. Adding to insult, in a few weeks, I'm moving to Tokyo for a dream job, which I had informed her on months ago. Now she's demanding an increase in child support. I'm open to that. However, I retorted that in order for that to happen, I want the current existing custody agreement to be enforced. That includes letting our daughter come spend time with me. Her response to that is child support and custody do not mix, and she's lawyering up to, just wanting more cash while stonewalling me. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have some thoughts. My first thought is, gosh, divorce sounds so messy and so terrible. I'm glad I haven't been through that, and hopefully never will. Fingers crossed. But the Canadian aspect to this is really interesting. Obviously, I think Trump has been pretty antagonistic towards Canada, like saying, "Oh, we're going to annex you, make you the 51st state, or what have you." And I roll my eyes at that, and I find that to be ridiculous. But there is nothing dangerous about for your daughter to come visit you in Florida. It's ridiculous. And your ex-wife sounds out of touch with reality. She has no idea what's happening and what's not happening, more importantly. But I guess, and I really can't say too much about this because I just don't know how these systems all work. But if you have a custody agreement, can't you take her to court in Canada and force her to abide by it? I would think that would be the immediate opportunity to write this, because she's just not upholding her end of this legally binding agreement. And then the moving to Japan is another kind of wrench thrown in here. But my first thought is, wait a second, if she's so concerned about Trump in the US and that's why she wants to break it off, but then you're leaving and you're going somewhere else and you just want that, then you want your daughter to come visit you and she still has an issue, well, then it's not really about Trump, is it? It sounds like she just doesn't want to let you see your daughter, which again is not her choice because you have a custody agreement. So she says she's lawyering up, well, I really don't know what to tell you other than you should too, and you should take her back to court. And regardless, I would say just try to maintain, even if you're not seeing her in person in the interim or what have you, very regular FaceTime, text, call, everything contact with your daughter, especially if she's in this kind of the Lulu echo chamber with all this woke stuff around her and her mom pushing this. So you can be her kind of connection to reality. And as she grows older as well, she'll have more independence and freedom and ability to choose what kind of relationship she has with you for herself rather than being subjected to kind of her mom's influences and decision making. But all you can do is your absolute best and invest as much time and energy into your daughter as you can, and then pursue whatever legal remedies you have available to you. But I hope it works out, and I hope your daughter is able to come visit you in Tokyo or Florida or wherever you may be, and that her mom's paranoia doesn't get in the way successfully. That's my thoughts, at least. You guys let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you've had not so nice interactions with the family court system. I have just very little experience in this area other than my own childhood as with divorced parents, which, gosh, that's another story for another day. But anyway, let me know what y'all think. Make sure to subscribe. Do send in your voicemails, linked in the description. One final voicemail for today that we're going to take a listen to. This is about a friend's sibling. We'll take a listen, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Hey Brad, my name is Addison. I'm a huge fan of your show. And I'm having a disagreement with my best friend right now, and I really want your advice. So, me and my best friend are both 19, and she has a younger sibling who identifies as a boy but is biologically female. She's almost 14, and I have respected this sibling's name and pronouns. And I caught up with my best friend today for the first time in a few months. And she told me that her sibling has just started testosterone. I'm hugely against child transitioning. And I asked her a couple questions about it, and she seems totally okay with this. And I did tell her, hey, you know your sibling's going to be sterile. And she says she knows that. And I said, okay. So I don't really know what to do. I don't want to lose this friendship, but I'm also really, really worried for her sibling. Anyway, thank you, and I could really use your advice.
Well, first, honestly, shout out to you, because not only do you have very good taste in podcasts, you also seem like a really caring person, and like you really care about your friend and her sibling and want what's best for them. But you didn't mention where you live, so I have to assume that you live in a state or locality where this is a legal thing that they are allowed to do. The parents are on board and have decided to do this, to medically transition their child at just 14. I find that to be unethical. I find that to be unconscionable. But if if it's legal and if the parents decide to do it, there's nothing you can do. I mean, you're just a friend of their siblings' friend. Your siblings, so you're just a friend here, and your friend's sibling is the one transitioning. There's nothing you can do. I don't want to say that you shouldn't care about this person at all, but it's not your problem. And the fact that you don't support it isn't really very relevant. I mean, that's a parenting decision. I think they're making the wrong decision, but I would say to you that there's nothing you can do about this other than, support candidates who want to restrict this or support change politically. But in terms of this individual situation, it's not within your control. And all you would do by trying to say something or stand up to them is just offend them and isolate yourself and break off your friendship. It's not like they're going to listen to you and be like, you know what, you're so right, we're not going to do this. I give that about a 0.1% chance of happening, right? It's very unlikely that they would somehow change their mind. So all you would be doing is causing tension and conflict and potentially damaging a friendship. So what's the point? I appreciate you wanting to stick to your values or say what you believe in, but I'm just not sure it's the appropriate venue for that. And I think you have to let people make their own mistakes, and you should just not talk about it and prioritize your friendship and be respectful. Obviously, if you start using the wrong pronouns for your friend's sibling or what have you, it could become an issue. So I would say just keep your thoughts to yourself. Let them go about it. I mean, that's all you really can do. And then be a good friend and make different choices in your own life and with your own kids, if it ever happens with them, and advocate for the things you believe in politically and socially. But yeah, you can't stop other people from making mistakes, and you can't, at the end of the day, try to impose your own beliefs and values onto everyone else in the micro form like this, because it's not going to work and it's just going to lead to tension. So it sounds like your heart is in the right place. You're trying to help, and I appreciate that. I forget what it's called. I think it's like the serenity prayer or something, but it's this idea that you have to know the difference between the things you can change and the things you can't, and focus your energy on the ones that you actually can. This would not be one of those, right? This is something beyond your control, beyond your power. So I think you just have to let it be. That's my take, at least. But y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Remember, links in the description to send in your voicemails for our next Voicemail Friday episode. And with that, that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Do like, subscribe, rate, and review on audio podcast platforms, or even recommend the podcast to a friend. With that, guys, we will talk again real soon.